Hey, hi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to be joining all of you live today for our LinkedIn Live conversation with a focus on the GBS market. We have a very special panel here today to discuss a very pertinent topic. Allow me to introduce myself and our panelists. I'm Rutashu Agarwal, partner with the firm and Everest Group with focus on our GBS practice. I have with me today Jacek. Jacek is a senior director in Cisco. He's responsible for professional services team in EMEA, and he's also the site leader for Cisco Krakow. He has several years experience in building and running GBS organizations in Poland and globally, and he's passionate about customer services, talent development, and introducing innovation to daily work. He also enjoys sports and listening to music. I'm also joined by Edita. Edita is the head of GFS EMEA and CFO for AstraZeneca. Edita is responsible for finance middle office in Warsaw and Dublin, taking care of about 300 employee units supporting EMEA region. She has 23 years of experience in finance across various countries. She believes in natural, authentic leadership, building long-term relationships, and is an ambassador for inclusion and diversity and focusing on people development. Welcome, Edita. We also have Antonio joining us from Takeda. Antonio is global head of HR for TBS and GREFP in Takeda. Before Takeda, he has worked with Coliseum, Kafka International, and has held several leadership role in HR for Kraft Heinz, Vodafone, GE Healthcare, and L'Oreal, working across Italy and China. Antonio has a master's in business management, lives in Switzerland currently with his wife Valentina and his kids, Asia and Alessandro. I hope they're listening in today, Antonio. So, some great insights for everyone. And in addition to his passion for people and organization roles, he is a keynote speaker and he has also authored a best selling book on international career development. And last but not the least, we have a seasoned industry practitioner and consultant, my friend Tom Bangerman. Tom is managing director at ABSL Dark Chapter. In addition, he runs his own consulting firm where he's MD for ConAxia. He heads the research for our peer organization SSON as well. So helping the entire ecosystem, Tom. He has been part of the GBS ecosystem for about 30 years now and won numerous awards, written many articles, worked with many organizations. He has mentored organizations, software companies, and has been a CHRO and supports startups as well. Again, a very power-packed panel that we have today. Once again, welcome all of you. And also, I see the panel is joining us from many different locations. I would even request our listeners today to share where they are joining in from. I'm dialing in from London. We have Switzerland, Poland, other locations covered. So, where are our listeners, joining in? Will be good to know. Now, about the topic for the discussion today, a very pertinent topic, something I'm really passionate about. We are, as we talk about what a new piece of research we have done and what is included and why have we done this. Uh, GBS leaders are often in a constant, war room scenario where they are needing to create their own employer brand. They are required to constantly focus on improving their competitiveness in the market and also improve their chances at acquiring and retaining best of the talent. So what we did is last year we started with a research called Top Employers Analysis. And within that, we looked at various publicly available sources of information. This was a very different approach we took. Instead of asking companies what they feel about themselves, we observed a blind spot where employers know what they know about themselves, but they are missing what they don't know, which is the employee perception. So we analyzed a lot of publicly available information across job portals, social media websites, other employee forums, and collated a lot of this information to analyze and share what is the feedback from employees on these employers. And we announced some of the top employers. Last year, we assessed about 200 GBS organizations across 3 markets. This year, we have gone a step further and analyzed about 300 organizations, and we are so happy to start unveiling the results, starting with Poland market. So you'll see a slide momentarily. We'll look at the Poland results on the next slide here, and we looked at various parameters that add up to the brand perception: compensation, benefits, work environment, career opportunities, diversity, inclusion, but also how successful these companies have been in the market. And as we look at the next page, without any further delay, we will showcase out of the 70 companies that were analyzed, each of them placed on this final summary as an individual dot. You will see that there are some that have emerged as brands, GBS brands that have a stronger brand positioning, a pull in the market. So, congratulations to all these organizations. And once again, congratulations to some of the panelists today who are representing these organizations. So we have Cisco, we have AstraZeneca, and we have Takeda, 3 of the companies joining us today. And the goal today will be to look into their reactions and go deeper into what comes, what leads to this success. What have they really done to get here? Just to call out for our listeners today, uh, you will get you can request a copy of this research report and also analysis of your specific organization for the Poland market. Look out for links in the chat section, and you can make a request there. Now, with that, let me ask my panelists today, starting with you, Edita, if I may. When you first heard about this analysis and how your organization has emerged as a top employer, what are your reactions? How do you see this kind of research?
I mean, obviously, it's very important to have such researches, right? To get visibility and obviously show the best practices. From AstraZeneca perspective, we could feel a pride and humbleness at the same time, because obviously on one hand is a privilege, and on the other hand it's obligation to continue or even strive to get better. So I'm really honored to be today on the panel representing AstraZeneca, being recognized one of the top employees.
Great. Jacek, what are your reactions to this?
Sure. So I would say a bit similar, right? So it's definitely very satisfying. And for an organization of 2,500 people here in Krakow, operating for 11 years, I would not being very much humble, right? I expect this organization to be kind of top in the employers, right? Because we know what to do, and I think we do it consciously. But it's always very, very satisfying, and it's always very good to have this recognition. And I think, especially being here in Krakow, which is probably one of the biggest kind of GBS hubs, surely in Poland, but also worldwide recognized, at least across EMEA. I think it's important to be there in a very competitive market, right? So absolutely great news, and motivated to work further, right?
Fantastic. Antonio, did anything here surprise you? How did you and your organization receive this?
To be honest, no surprise. So that's exactly the way we felt. It's like when you achieve something you have worked for since quite a while, right? So it didn't come unexpected, but nevertheless, it was humbling and a big sense of pride to achieve, to be in the top quadrants and to be leading the way. And I can definitely echo what my colleagues just said, Edita and Jacek. So we feel the responsibility to stay where we are, the responsibility among the peers, because we know that leading the way means also being role model, as well as, and first and foremost, I would say, with our employees and our potential candidates to stay where they have recognized us. The other thing that also I like to point out it's also on the methodology of the research you have done, which is focused on sources that are not only the company, which is even more for us humbling in terms of getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been a lot of debate last year and then especially this year that should there be a voice of the employer. And it was a very conscious and a bit difficult decision to still delineate and keep it completely perception based because we believe that adds a different perspective and then kind of avoids a bit of an echo in the system. Yeah, you're absolutely right in calling that out, Antonio. Tom, let me come over to you. You've been in the industry for a while. You have seen different kinds of challenges and different kinds of research. How do you see the importance of such evaluations and branding for GBS organizations?
So as you guys hinted already, it's a perception based evaluation, and you can always do an internal perception based evaluation, external, and you could do something more metrical in terms of research, right? So you have at least three options, and you always get gaps between these. But nevertheless, as we know, perception is truth. And I would agree with Antonio that an external market-based perception analysis is always very useful, and it often differs from what you internally think. So I'm sure there will be companies who might have expected a different positioning on this grid, and there are often sort of both surprises, positive and negative. In terms of branding, let me just add a few things on branding, because I just recently wrote a branding in GBS study that just came out a few weeks ago. So I'll add a few interesting things. I think it's more difficult for companies like Takeda and AstraZeneca to get a high rating on this because they're not consumer brands in that sense. You know, it would be quite sad if every young person knew them, because while they certainly have good products, we don't want every young person to need them, right? So in that sense, to get there as a not so known brand is quite difficult. In this branding study, it's interesting, only half the GBS actually have a dedicated branding approach. So there's room for improvement. And I think one of the reasons is that when you look at this thing called reputation, which of course is the result of all these activities, then the reputation with all the different stakeholder groups in most GBS is actually very good. And when you look at it in more detail, you find out that the internal reputation is even better than the external one. So I think what happens is that GBS internally think that their customer is actually very happy. You know, all the scorecards are green, everything runs, employees don't always complain, most of them are happy. So there doesn't seem to be a reason to do any branding activity. But the external side, as I mentioned, is often not as good. It might be 10, 15 points lower. And therefore, I think your analysis is great because it goes exactly into sort of that slot to show what actually is the external view on this. And since you pointed out the talent management topic is one of the biggest or most problematic issues we have on the agenda currently. So I think this is exactly where we need to go currently.
No, absolutely, Tom. And just yesterday, we were doing another webinar. And despite all the slowdown in demand and layoffs in the market, talent emerged as one of the top concerns among GBS leaders. So definitely this is needed. I see we have a very diverse audience today. I can see in comments people are joining it from South Africa, Switzerland, Egypt, Belgium. It will be great to hear, reactions or any questions you may have. Feel free to post them in the chat. Just to remind you, you can see link in the chat to request for a complimentary copy of this analysis, and also to get your company's evaluation. Just to highlight, we only celebrate employers in the research that is published. So if you're not listed among the top employers, you can get a one-to-one, detail of how your company performed. And other thing you said, Tom, this is tricky business. As compared to the last year's rankings, we see about 40-45% companies who were in the top employers list actually slipped out. So this is not one and done. This requires continuous effort. So let's talk about that a bit more, right? Let me start with you, Antonio. Uh, it's not as if you can continue to do the same thing and stay a differentiated employer, a preferred employer. And then last few years, particularly in the region, have been very challenging. COVID, then talents, war, then the other war. So it has not been easy on people. So tell us a little bit more about, how have the employee expectations changed, and how do you keep up with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. And on top of what you're saying, I will add also that as TBS, Takeda Business Solutions, we in the last 4 years now, three years and a half, we reshaped our organization quite deeply. So we started from Takeda Business Services, we evolved into Takeda Business Solutions, which was not only a change in the naming, but a change in the mindset and the culture. And then now we are focusing more and more into the experience and the connection with the purpose, which if I will have the chance, I will go into more details later. So, but as you can imagine, doing all of those changes and transition and evolutions, while outside world was facing a pandemic and was living the life we all have been living in the last few years, it was like a double jump, but at the same time it proved our direction was right. So we took this direction before COVID, and then COVID just accelerated the getting to the destination, didn't change the destination at all. Of course, the way we all work, changed dramatically in the last years, and we had to adapt also the way we were approaching our change management. I can give you an easy example. We did hire a lot of people because we scaled up our presence in Poland quite dramatically in the last years. And you can imagine we had in certain days and weeks entire teams starting all remotely. So we had to work on two different dimensions at the same time. On one side, the efficiency of the process, so to make things happen, so to make sure that people simply got a working laptop, mobile phone the day one of their job, so to grant the right experience, but at the same time also to make sure that people felt connected and not just working in the same room with the same wall in front of them, in the same kitchen as the day before, as they were all working. So being able to transfer the company culture in such a different environment while taking care of new and existing employees, having them with the feeling of being cared of. I can give you the very last point. During the pandemic time, the sense of connectiveness and the sense of belonging in our organization grew up.
Mhm.
instead of sliding down. So that's quite, and we keep on measuring on our yearly survey. During the pandemic, we did a specific survey on care. We called care, so to care about the people. So of course we saw the mental health, we saw all the different topic raising in our survey, but we saw progresses, not the other way around. And that, I think, it was really really key for our success.
But that's great, Antonio. Thanks for sharing. And it's a lot about acceleration of that line of strategy that you were taking, and then how you invested in increasing the engagement, and then kind of satisfaction level among your employees. Uh, Jacek, how was it at Cisco? How did things change, and what were your focus areas in the last 2 to 3 years?
Sure. So I think that there are some similarities to what Antonio was saying, for sure, right? So I think one element, specifically during pandemic, I think we went full remote, right? And I think at a certain point of time, even after pandemic, we reached a point of no return, right? So the new normal is not going to be in the office, at least for Cisco, and we appreciated that, and we know that employees actually appreciated that flexibility, and they want to stay in that way, right? So we adjusted to that, and we remained, let's say, fully hybrid, with the full flexibility towards the employees and their choice. But then we try to address, and I think the expectations of the employees have been vocalized, right, on being supported while actually being remote, right, or being hybrid, which means that we needed to look at and take care of their well-being, including mental but also physical, and of course addressing the risks of the employees feeling detached and not getting the culture, right? So that's the similarity that Antonio was talking about as well, right? So we made it through regular employee check-ins, and actually taking care and listening to what the employees have to say, and address their needs. And I think that that expectations will keep on evolving in extent, right? I think we already see that 1 year, let's say, after, they are a bit different than they were a year before. And I think the key here is to to listen into those expectations and adjust accordingly, but still get that flexibility or give that flexibility to the employees, right? At least we at Cisco think that that's the key to address those changing expectations of the employees.
Anita, has it been similar for you? Or are you also observing something different?
No, I mean, quite similar. And what I just wanted to mention is that we create a workspace for employees, but with employees as well. So that's why this speak up culture, at least in AstraZeneca, is very important. We want to hear what are, let's say, the expectations of the employees and how much we can meet them, obviously, because it cannot be done 100%. What I wanted to mention actually is that during the pandemic especially, we put quite a lot of attention and effort into psychological safety. So let's say it was pre-pandemic as well, but during pandemic, we moved our, let's say, focus from the employee to human being, right? So we started to work in environment when everyone, regardless of the position, can confront any challenges. So this is what actually we've been focusing recently, and we continue because we can see it resonates with people. And definitely builds the bonds also between them and the organization. So that would be my point to that topic.
I think, Rohit, what happened during the pandemic, I mean, luckily it's over now, but I do think it still plays a role in this assessment, because it's always like that in good times things are good, and in bad times you see who actually is your friend and what the real face of an employer is, right? And I do think that this still carries forward for a few years. So these stories and the happiness or unhappiness of employees during those times is still known in the market.
Absolutely, that's a great point, Tom. In fact, we saw that there is a bit of a lag effect, how some of the experience that employees go through starts translating into the feedback that they are sharing, and then starts, reflecting in some of the analysis like this. So what happened during the pandemic led to a lot of positive engagement, as everybody here shared, but also a lot of challenges, and then a lot of cutthroat competition for talent during the early part of 2022 also created a bit of a mixed experience. And in fact, one of the questions we are receiving is, how do employees based out of different geos, for the GBS in Poland impact? And again, there are a couple of ways to interpret this. My interpretation will be, if you have a very distributed workforce within Poland, or even if some employees of GBS in Poland are in adjoining regions, how does that impact your ability to engage those employees and kind of deliver similar experience? So if I might start with you, Edita, in case you have a distributed workforce. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm responsible also for the team in Dublin. So obviously it's quite important, and it's like making sure we are in touch not only on like business related topic, but also have a time for like coffee chat, let's say, even this when it's done through Teams, and we can discuss different personal issues or challenges or successes as well. So what we try to do, or we did in the past, is make this link between the employees and managers as well. So definitely making sure the gap is minimal, and then we have like regular interactions with guys in the different geographies. So that would be my insight.
Tom, anything you want to add on this topic? You've worked with a lot of organizations in managing a fairly distributed workforce model.
No, I think it was done really well during the pandemic, and we have all learned how to do it. And not that most of us didn't know before, but now it really sits well. As Jacek pointed out, it's basically the standard now. We operate in distributed environments, and I mean most employers hire countrywide anyway and are looking at how you can hire region-wide. You know, it's only a labor or tax law issue in some cases, but otherwise we're looking for the best person for the company regardless of where they sit. So I think that is the logic that companies are following now, and the other things are just restrictions, really, to be honest.
And Yasik, in the last few months, as there have been all these news about layoffs, particularly in the North American market, and then expanding into some other markets, there is a building sense of, a building sense that this is turning back to be an employer's market. So if you want to bring back your teams to offices, bring them now, and particularly within banking, financial services, or even in some of the tech sectors, we have seen a bit of that change in direction. What are your thoughts about this? Do you expect even Polish market to make a turn into that direction or continue in the direction that Tom was talking about?
Uh, well, I can say for Cisco, right? I think for the market, yes, I've observed the same, and also in technology companies, right? That there are some companies who are actually getting that kind of return to office on a mandated basis, right? Cisco, I personally, we don't believe that this is actually the right way to do it, right? So we strongly believe that the office should be a magnet, not a mandate, right? And that's kind of a top-down culture in the company. That yes, of course, we try to get people on board and into the culture and get back into the physical connection as well, because it's helpful. And as at that pointed out as well, right? I mean, having a coffee chat. Yeah, you can do it via with the help of technology, but it doesn't always replace a real coffee chat, right, or meeting somebody for lunch. So yes, we bring that collaboration element, but and it's hugely important for the culture. It's much easier to kind of spread the culture if you have office. But I don't see that mandating this and being in the office is actually helping us out. I think it actually will turn back, and whatever the economical situation will be, even if the market is changing a little bit towards, let's say, employer market and the employee market, I don't think that this will be a solution to anything, right? I think actually that will be completely contradictory or counterproductive to actually achieving employee engagement rather than having any benefits from this.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Jacek. So, moving on, let me ask you this, Antonio. And again, we got a very interesting question from Christina here, but let me build on that. So, the question is, how can you attract and retain top talent? But let me ask you this slightly differently. Almost, all of you, and then even the broader industry, almost everybody is trying to work on certain similar areas, right? Be competitive in comp and ben, offer differentiated work environment, best work environment experience, support career development, support diversity inclusion. So the basic dimensions of your employee value proposition are not different. What do you do differently within Takeda? The way you approach these elements and the way you deliver these to your employees that help you achieve this differentiated value proposition. So tell us a little bit about your secret sauce, to success.
How much time do we have? No, I'm joking. I'll try to stay brief on this one. I get patient on the topic. So even here, I can take, let's say, two level in the answer. There are, of course, practical things that we think that differentiate us in the market, which is the way we are organized. First of all, we have a captive model, so we can provide our people within our TBS organization with developmental opportunity. And we have a very deliberate people agenda that has been built on steps, focusing on recruiting, onboarding, and then people development. So we know that most of our people wants to then have careers into the embedded functions outside of the GBS. One of the things we are proud of is the talent export, and as we like to call ourselves, it's to be the talent engine within the organization that sustain best-in-class ambition while delivering an exceptional people experience. So that's exactly our ambition for me and my HR team. Then we also implemented some probably let's say differentiating programs within the market. One of these is the TDA that goes to the universities. So if internally we want to promote, then we want to source from early career perspective the next generation talents and groom them to be the future leaders. So we went to the university and we said to the best students, look, we can teach you how to develop robots, how to work with the AI and RPA. Come to us. We will train you for 2 months, and then we will give you a business case, and then we will split you in teams, and the winning teams can have a 12 months rotational program with us, which is total disruptor in the market. And we launched that in Poland, in Japan, in different locations. So for me, those are the differentiating point, as you said, that you have in your people agenda, and of course can give you some, let's say, some added value compared to the competitors for a while, but then of course can be replicated. Then there is the ground, the base of everything, the secret sauce, if you want, which is the connection to the purpose. And that's the uniqueness of your organization. And one of the areas where we spent and invest time, effort, when we revamped and when we rewrote our employer value proposition was exactly that. No matter what you do in our organization, even if you are far remote from the patient, that everything we do needs to be for the good of the patient. So, and we invest a lot of time and programs and efforts to make sure that everyone in the organization sees the connection. No matter if you're processing an invoice, if that's an invoice, for example, that is related to any logistical service that maybe influence the delivery of a drug to a patient, then yeah, you are processing an invoice today, but you are making a drug being delivered to the patient at the end of the day. So you are having an impact to the patient. That's what makes the difference. I'm not saying only Takeda has a purpose to work for, that everyone has a purpose, but the point is find your purpose, communicate well to your employees, current employees and prospect employees, be coherent. So you cannot say your purpose is something and then in the day-to-day job you see something completely different. And that's the secret sauce to make the uniqueness and make the right fit, right, with the people that are in your organization. That's at least the way we have done in the last 3-4 years, and that's paying the dividend today.
That makes a lot of sense, Antonio. And even during pandemic, we saw immediately after when everybody was trying to ramp up, and there was a intense war for talent. We saw a lot of companies opening up new benefit schemes, able to hire talent, but also leaking talent, at the same time. And one of the key observations we had was that unless it's truly part of your culture, the way you operate every day, even employees are able to see through that, right? That there's just a desperate attempt, and you're not truly living that. So the part that you said, that every organization has a purpose, but identify yours and integrate that into day-to-day working. That makes a lot of sense. Another thing I loved about what you shared is how you are going to the universities and investing in training that talent for the skills you need. That's another problem. Everybody in the industry poaching each other's talent. That's not sustainable, right? And then that's not even feasible because there is a structural gap in demand and supply. So creating the talent you need, absolutely love that aspect, and I believe that's good for the industry. Uh, Jacek, when we were talking, you spoke about also looking into some alternative talent pools. So help us understand more about what you do to achieve this position in a very competitive market.
Sure. So I'll talk about something else before I get to the talent, right, and how we get talent. But I think and it kind of I see that schema repeating a little bit, right? So the purpose and the culture is something that I think is the differentiator as well, right? In a sense, because while remaining truly hybrid, we have a very strong culture at Cisco, and it's kind of I would say it's driven top to down from the perspective of what do we want to achieve and who we are and how we approach the purpose and the engagement. But on the other hand, it's actually driven by the employees, right? So we listen to the employees. They have full autonomy into what they engage and how they want to engage in different things. And if you listen to that and you support them, I think it creates a culture that is very, very strong, right? And it cannot be affected even by being hybrid or close elements, right? And I think the differentiator as well, I mean, in a very dramatic situation last year, right, with the war starting, how Cisco reacted to it, right, how much time the employees could actually spend supporting the refugees. I mean, it all plays a role, right? And those are just the examples. When it comes to talent and the retention of talent, I think yes, we are absolutely looking into. We are still working with universities and we are still working with graduates and the interns. What we did over the last 2 years, and we developed a program. We looked at, especially in technology area, we look at the talent that is actually looking for a career change as well. So people who are willing to join, let's say, IT or technology market and don't have the rights they don't have the background in technology, right? So I think similar to Antonio was saying, investing at the universities, we actually invested in mature workforce. And it was a huge success. I mean, it is a huge success because we're continuing to do this, right? So not only we are actually getting talent, we're getting people who have experience on top of the talent, right? They are willing to learn, they have right motivation, and they make a conscious decision, right, at a certain part of their career that they want to do it. And it creates huge diversity on top of it, right? It adds to the diversity because the diversity of background and the education is also an element into the whole mix of diversity in Cisco. So I think that it creates and it creates new ways of getting talent into the market, as you say, right? Not poaching that talent from competition, right? But trying to be creative in how we approach. So I think that's the way one of the ways to get the talent. The second way is to try to retain the talent. I think on top of all the benefits and compensation and everything that is kind of hard measured, I think that purpose and that engagement is a very strong element of it, right? I think generally employees right now, I think all of us eventually, right? We identify ourselves as a company a little bit, right? And we want to be proud of what we do. So whatever you do, right? Eventually, if you're baking cookies or producing equipment or delivering services, eventually you want to be proud at the end of the day, and you want to be proud of the market you work for, right? So part of the culture is to create that possibility for the employees to be proud.
Apologies, has to happen once, right? So let me ask you this. So both you and Antonio also spoke about a lot of engagement during the pandemic. So do you see long-lasting benefits of the goodwill that employers earned during that phase, or do you think the workforce has actually kind of moved on and is focusing on now and what lies ahead? What I'm also accordingly linking this to is, to what extent does the aspect of culture and engagement suffice versus what you said, Yasik, that comp and ben is there, but we focus more on this. But that competition today, that comp and ben is still dominating the decision making from the employee side. So how do you see the long lasting effect of that versus need to put that behind you and continue to focus on future? And second, the balance between financial aspects of employee value prop and these other aspects. Let me get your reaction, Yasik, and then I'll ask Antonio.
And I think it has to go hand in hand, right? There is no or, there is and, right? Eventually, you need to be competitive at all fronts, and we know that we learn from each other, right? And we try to be best, and everybody wants to be in the upper right corner of your evaluation eventually, right? So good ideas will be copied, and somebody else will be doing the same tomorrow. So I think it has to be competitive, right? It has to be competitive from a financial perspective, but it has to be appealing appealing from a perspective of the engagement and the working conditions, the work-life balance, the eventual life being of an employee, right? So it has to balance it out. And I'm a strong believer that the compensation is a big element of your job, but it's not the only or not the biggest even, right? Considering all the situations we had over the last week.
Mm-hmm. And then, Antonio, do you see similar observations? Do you have similar observations, or do you differ?
Totally similar to what Jacek just said. It's maybe also a matter of mindset, but I firmly believe we should strongly be focused on the future. So what the last few years taught us is that the world is changing, and it's changing always at a fastest pace. So definitely the experience we gained, the lesson we learned will be useful and reapplied in the future. And it's not like, as we said before, it's not about going back. It's always about what's next. And the organizations need to build on that agility, need to build on that mindset and culture, and keep on evolving. As I keep on saying and sharing with my team and colleagues in the organization, we are changing and evolving on a daily basis. I can tell you. And of course, sometimes that brings a bit of a fatigue, right? It's normal, but I will definitely be much more worried if I was in a company or in an organization that was not developing, because I know the world out there, it's developing, it's changing, it's evolving. And if you're not staying at the same pace, then at a certain point the gap will be so big that will require you to do some more drastic measures. So it is important to keep this agility we have kind of learned and reapply every day in completely new fields and areas. And so going back to a question that was raised before, that's also impacting the skills we need to look for. Because what the new technologies are teaching us is that a lot of things can be automated, but the agility, the ability to reapply knowledge in different fields, that's where we need to invest. The soft skills, the leadership skills in general terms, but more broader than that, it's definitely still the hot topic and the area where we need to focus in the coming years. At least that's my view.
Oh, absolutely. And then, Edita, tell us a little bit about what happened behind the scenes within AstraZeneca, and what do you do differently? And again, you have Takeda here, similar industry, similar market. So there are some things that you do in a similar fashion. Some basic commonalities in all great organizations. But how do you succeed?
Yeah, I believe that we have like strong bases. So one of our core values being ethics, transparency, and innovation. This is our, drive, irrespectively of the moment in a lifetime, and this is the strong base for the future. And being strong in innovation, obviously we look for the future, right? And we also look for the different technology and solutions. So one of the example could be that we change slightly the talent acquisition process, utilizing more technology, that we can release people and focus on searching for talents, right? So this was the benefit of having more technology serving our purpose. Definitely working closer with employees and more bottom-up activities and initiatives. We have 4 different ERGs around inclusion and diversity, and we do closely cooperate with this group, and IND is actually one of the Warsaw site strategy pillar. So it's a combination of technology, I would say, and listening to the people and taking, this diversity of thought as well and inspiration to make sure the company runs to the success, right? And we also, the last maybe point, something what has been already mentioned, and it really resonates with me, that we need to look for the future skill set we need, not only from the hard skill perspective, but also soft skill, not only soft skill on the employee level, but I would say even more critical from the leadership perspective, right? So we as a leaders can drive the organization and can show the direction to our team members.
That's great. And then, Tom, a couple of times there has been emphasis on hiring for the right skills for future, developing for the right skills for future. How much do you see that practice being adopted in the market versus GBS organizations still focusing on how many seats they have, what teams they are filling, and then hiring that, and also any best practices that you have observed and worked in your experience that can help GBS organizations do this part well.
I think there is a trend to do what Edita said. I would still argue that the minority of companies actually does that. They will say that, but not necessarily do that. So it's a good intention that hasn't moved into the operations yet. Let's put it that way, in a nice way, okay? And the skill list is interesting because it changes constantly. Last piece of research that I produced on that topic, the most interesting thing was actually that the huge gap we had on technology skills is getting smaller. So we are having more supply in the market, and because we have had supply for a few years now, the demand is also at least not growing that exponentially as it used to, right? So I think the huge problem we had 5 years ago with anybody who could do anything on technology skills was needed. That's getting a bit smaller. There's still a gap, but it's getting smaller. And then, as you guys pointed out, you can train people on almost everything. So the upskilling, reskilling component, I think, is really, really important. I still think that companies often rely too much on just hiring the ready-made person instead of putting some money and effort into, creating the employee that you actually would like to have. And it could already be somebody who's in the organization. You just need to reskill or upskill. And there's in the skill list, there's always one skill that I find is tricky, which is empathy, because you need an increasing amount of that in today's environment. And it is, in my view, basically the only thing you cannot teach, right? So if you need that, that would be the one thing I would tell the recruiting people to really look out for, because everything else, theoretically, I can teach them. So there's a lot of movement on the skills front. I think what is also a bit tricky is last piece of research I saw on how long people will actually stay in the company said that the young people who you hire today will stay between 1 and 3 years. So if you have this expectation that you can do whatever you want, they leave after 3 years anyway. Companies are sometimes reluctant to invest a lot of money into that training piece, which I understand. And then most markets, you cannot, at least in Europe, you cannot make him pay back or anything like that, right? So it's a little bit difficult situation. But nevertheless, the direction is exactly as Edita pointed. It just, as always, it's a big tanker and it moves slowly.
And a couple of very interesting points you made, So one, I will just emphasize on the way you articulated it, that the gap is getting smaller, but there is still a gap. So you can't kind of, relax. The problem has not gone away and it's structural. Also, what you said in terms of that, if the average tenure, and we picked up same thing, Tom, if the average tenure is shorter, aren't companies then incentivized to further accelerate investment that make people productive faster? Because you can't wait till year 2 or year 3 to achieve a higher productivity. They'll be gone possibly. But also, how do you create positive engagement in the period while you have them? Because the workforce may again come back. There is a lot of boomerang effect in the industry right now. So how do you create more stickiness? People may go for behavior, other experiences, but how do you bring them back? In fact, there was this very valid discussion on how policies need to change to adapt to the changing nature of workforce tenure and behaviors. Uh, Absolutely.
I think there were many good things said already. I would agree with the colleagues here. purpose, culture, brand perception often plays a role, although it's just a perception and not a real operational performance topic, right? Learning and development opportunities, things like that, they are typically ranked higher than compensation. But of course, this ranking depends on where you are. So if you're in India or Philippines, you will know this, Rohit, the ranking is different. And it typically follows the development level of the country, right? Because you need to be able to afford to find purpose important. So, and Poland is one of those happy places. Most people who work in GBS have never seen a recession. They have only lived in growth times.
Growth times, yeah.
So therefore, the thinking, of course, is exactly that. It's let's say very positive in the sense that every topic that is out there is something they require. So whether it's ESG or green office or purpose or culture or anything, they want all that, and that's great. But if you go to some, let's say, less developed locations, of course, you will see a different ranking, and those topics, they're not so high on the agenda because they can't afford them. They just want decent compensation, maybe travel, maybe move somewhere else in a few years' time. So those would be, I think, the key points.
Yeah, and you can call it a good thing, or the irony is that even now, with all the slowdown concerns, the GBS market has very strong demand forecasts. And because of the talent concerns, the employees will still see a growth, in kind of more opportunities, more development opportunities, and not really a major slowdown in compensation levels, etc. as well. So definitely, there's a need to keep up. We're getting a lot of questions from our audience. So let me ask you some. So let me put open-ended question. Anybody who wants to take this, that we're talking about engagement, but are there also certain types of talent that you are letting go, or kind of, I would say, deprioritizing in your focus areas? Because during the talent scramble, resignation period, we also saw a lot of rapid hiring. Not necessarily all those employees are fit for long-term employment. Do you see any of those challenges as well? And Tom, if I may start with you, and then open-ended for any of our other panelists.
Let's go through the route, and I'll add something at the end if that's okay with you, Roy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I can say for us, right? I mean, we with all the layoffs happening in the market, we went into what we call a rebalance, right? So basically what we said is in the skill set areas where the demand is not so high, we actually cross-trained this talent into the areas where the demand is higher, right? So I would say in all the technology companies, we are in a happy place when it comes to switching talent and investing in talent, right? And then the willingness to actually train and move into the new areas, right? So that's answering part of that question. I think that agility and willingness to learn is probably one of the biggest skill set that you can now get on the market and that you need as an employer.
Yeah, and if I may add on this point, connecting to what I was saying before. So the more the organization constantly changes, the less of a bigger gap you accumulate, and then the less of a bigger impact you have in your organization, and the more you can focus almost on individual cases. Some of the experiences that we had is that by changing constantly our organization, we have been able quite often to reabsorb people in roles that were to be eliminated by repurposing, by reskilling. Of course, if you don't do anything for 1 or 2 years, and then you have all of a sudden 200-300 roles that are moving into a new stage, then it's more difficult. But if you keep on doing that on a day-to-day basis, that's where the talent management and active talent management from HR and from the leaders and from the people involved, by keeping themselves at the cutting edge of technology, skills, expertise, that can make a difference to absorb this. So when you see this big disruption, it's probably something that is being accumulated in the previous years and months, which sometimes it's also industry related.
Yeah, if I could just add maybe one or two sentences. It's quite important what Antonio mentioned, that this is about the dialogue between HR leader and the employee. So we understand how we can support in terms of further development. From AstraZeneca perspective, we are in quite a lucky situation that having number of functions in Warsaw and Krakow, like from R&D area, procurement, HR, IT, and finance, people can change roles. So also get new experience and get new knowledge. So this is also how we support talents. I mean, I must admit we had to let go few people, but few of them came back luckily to AZ again, right? So experiencing external world, having own criteria of what is important, they decided to come back. So there are, number of ways to manage.
Rohit, I think the answer to this question depends a lot on who you ask. And if I'm not mistaken, we have 3 companies here who are all financially doing fairly well, let's put it that way. And then you have a different environment in which you need to, or the responses to the cost issues are different, right? And cost, nevertheless, is number one topic currently on every GBS agenda, right? And it's even higher than it was previously, because in crisis times, that's what always happens. Cost becomes even more important than before, because there's uncertainty, and uncertainty makes people think about where they can save or what they can do, regardless of whether it's needed. And so therefore, I think these 3 probably have very good ways of dealing with these things. But it's fair to say that there's probably a lot of audience out there who don't always have the possibility to do all these nice to have things that they might want to do, because the cost pressure is enormous, right? So I think what is key in that situation is to do what probably Edita did, because if she got back these people, she must have done a very proper process in terms of outplacing them or, firing them.
If I could answer your, if I could comment on this one, for me, it's important not what, but how. And I believe people come back for this how.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best thing you can do if you are in a situation that you have to let go of some people, to at a minimum run a proper process and explain them why and all these things that go with that process. And then they might come back. And coming back to an employer that you have left before, for example, in Europe, is actually very difficult to get done from an employer point of view. In the US, it's much easier. Somehow people are more forgiving. So if you get this done in Europe, I think it's an additional sort of star that Edita gets today for having been able to get back people who have been let go. So I find that always a really tangible measurement that you can use to assess what kind of sort of talent management cycle ending there actually is.
So precisely, and I was just looking at the watch, and the hour has flown by really quickly. I know a couple of you can stay on for a few extra minutes, so we will get into the wrap-up mode. Again, we have had great audience today. A lot of questions coming in. Some questions which we are not able to take right now, we'll try and address via chat. We'll request everyone who's listening in right now, who's going to be listening in later, do ask your questions in the chat. Me, other panelists, we would love to share our responses, continue the dialogue. A couple of reminders that you can request for a copy of the report. You can also request for a complimentary check of your GBS brand perception. But also in June, on June 13th, we'll be hosting another webinar to share the results for other markets as well, India and Philippines, the other 2 big GBS markets. So do register for that event as well. Edita, I know you might have to drop out in a minute or so. So let me just ask you this very quickly. Antonio earlier talked a little bit about we have to look forward, how do you look at that? What are your key priorities as you move forward, or how are you ensuring that there is a continuous focus in the times of some of the financial constraints and then other constraints that the market is facing? Edita, if I may ask you, how are you ensuring continuous focus on this going forward? If you could share a little bit before you drop out.
Yeah, and if I could ask you to repeat the question, apologize. I lost the connection for like a few important seconds, looks like.
No problem. I was just asking that as we look forward, it is not a given that you can maintain your status as a top employer. You have to work hard. But given the constraints that are there in the market right now, how do you ensure your organization continues to prioritize investments in talent and employee engagement? Okay. Let us circle back to Edita. I think.
Yeah, you lost me again. So it's a sign I need to leave for another call. I do apologize. I have to have a hard stop. So thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
invitation and a good discussion. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Yes, if you could hear the last part, let me ask you the same question. Profitable or not, every firm is under pressure to optimize. So how do you ensure, especially when there is a feeling among the top leadership that this is becoming an employer's market, we need to do less probably, or we can get away by doing less?
So now I think being first of all being in top of the GBS brands, right, in your report is I think a strong commitment from the company that towards employees that we want to stay there, right? And I think the key priorities going forward, which I think touch on costs, right? I mean, taking care of our employees in the way we do, right? Taking care about looking at the diversity that we have, which is great actually. I mean, 1/3 of our employees are actually from abroad, right? In here, from 2,500 people. And looking at that diversity actually has a positive business impact, right? I mean, looking at retaining talent and getting that culture and purpose has a positive business impact eventually, right? So I don't see that as being contradicting, right? I mean, as a contradicting element of your business, right? And with the cost pressure, yes, of course. I mean, the economy is changing, and we might have different conditions and different companies at different times. It's not an excuse for stop doing what's right for your employees and what's right for eventually diversity, inclusivity, and we have a program which is called One Company, Many Careers, and I think that's again an element of culture and an element that actually helps the company going forward, and it helps even the financial side of things, right? I mean, keeping employees in the company, having people staying here for decades, having 4 different careers in a completely 4 different departments. It's not a cost addition, right? I mean, it's again a business benefit for both the employee and the company, right? So I would say the priority going forward is yes. Well, I'll do my best to grow the GBS business that we have here in Cisco in Krakow, because that allows the employees to grow with the business in here, right, and allows the company to run by itself and nurture the culture and nurture the diversity. I would say that's as easy as it sounds, right? I think I can make this commitment here online.
Absolutely, and we are down to the last minute. So, Tom, Antonio talked about how the world is constantly changing. We need to keep adapting to it. Jacek told about making sure that this stays in the front, kind of a top priority. Any last piece of advice you would have for our audience, the GBS leaders who are listening in today, as they look forward to this?
I think we have, in the meantime, a very big amount of companies and GBS organizations in the world, and some started over 30 years ago and some started yesterday, and the differences between them are huge. And I think we will see further differentiation between the companies. There's the Takedas of this world, which it's a fairly young organization in terms of business services, and still they also won runner-up for world's best GBS recently. So it's possible to get from 0 to 100 quite fast, but it requires a will and a lot of activity to get that done. And there's a small group of companies that runs faster than the rest, and they will create their sort of own ecosystem. I'm quite sure the differentiation in the market gets bigger and bigger, and there's a huge amount of companies who don't even use GBS or anything like that as a naming convention, because they see their operations still as a sort of extended workbench approach in terms of transactional activity. And I think those are very different things. So therefore, the recommendation based on all of this is that if you want to get the talents, which we have been talking about today, right? I don't think many of them want the transactional workbench, not in Poland and not in India and not in the Philippines. So I think it's a better, I mean, if you are able to automate everything, then it doesn't matter. But I've yet to see the company that actually gets to 100% automation level. As we know, we have trying to do this for a long time now, and it just takes longer than we anticipated. So that would be my recommendation, to be progressive on these things and really try to develop into a modern business services organization.
Well said, Tom. And I think what some of these journeys have shown us is that there is a breakthrough path. Organizations don't need to follow the same journey, can learn from those who started a bit early, made some more mistakes, had to find their way. But it needs the right engine, it needs the right leadership, right driver, and it needs a full balance, right? All aspects of organization. So once again, we will cover some more details around how leaders have to have, what they have done to achieve these differentiated results. So request all our listeners to use the link in the chat, request for a copy of the report, watch out for the upcoming webinar and details, and let's continue the conversation in chat. Once again, congratulations to you, Antonio and Jacek, and your organizations. It is not easy and it's not done. So good luck. And Tom, like always, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.